2,400 years ago, Plato imagined one of the most popular thought experiments ever. Picture this. Prisoners are chained in a dark cave next to a fire. The only thing they've ever seen are the shadows on the wall. To them, this was truth. Reality itself was nothing more than distorted fragments in a dark cave. We have something similar today, but the illusions don't come from a dimly lit cave, but from the bright lights of smartphones, billboards, and images of all kind. We live in what Guy Debord called the society of the spectacle. Despite being published in the 1960s, this work of philosophy is extremely important for understanding our modern reality. So in this episode, we're going to be exploring the key takeaways from Guy Debord's Society of the Spectacle. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to History for Thinkers, a show that brings history to life. Before we get into it, I just have to warn you, this is a terrifying episode to watch. This is one of those ideas, one of these philosophical frameworks and ways of thinking that once you see it, you don't really unsee it. This is always going to be in the back of your mind. It's kind of terrifying. I came across this idea, months ago now. And the more I look into it and think about it and explore other philosophical works that build on top of this, the more terrified I am. So, just know what you're getting into. This is not going to be a light episode. It's kind of horrifying, like truth be told. But that's what we're into here for some reason. So we'll stop hyping it up and actually get into it. So Debord opens the book by saying, quote, "In societies where modern conditions of production prevail, life is presented as an immense accumulation of spectacles. Everything that was directly lived has receded into a representation." So you can think of the spectacle essentially as a distorted version of reality. It is an illusion. It's almost as if it's a fiction that we all agree to live under. He later writes, quote, "The spectacle is not a collection of images. It is a social relation between people that is mediated by images." So you can think about it in the sense that we are using commodities, right? The things that we buy, consumer goods, our clothes, computer, all the fancy stuff that we buy, iPhones, we use these to communicate with other people, right? If you really want people to know that you are, athletic, you buy clothes that, like sports clothes, right? You always wear those, basketball shorts. So everyone knows that, you go for runs or you go to the gym or, whatever you want them to think. There's a very strange aspect to our consumer behavior. And this is kind of what he's getting at with a lot of spectacle, but that's not all of it. So Debord continues, quote, "Understood in its totality, the spectacle is both the result and the project of the present mode of production." So this is a roundabout way of saying that the spectacle is fundamentally interconnected to capitalism. And one other important point that we need to acknowledge here is that the spectacle, it has no rigid definition, right? You can't really boil it down to a single sentence or even a single paragraph. It is a framework of thought. It is something that it evolves, it changes, partly because what it is describing has changed so much. So Debord had published this book in, I think it was 1967, and the spectacle that he was describing then and the spectacle that we have today are two very different things. Now, there are some similarities. There is a lot of overlap, right? But at the end of the day, we have social media, we have the internet, we have things that were not around during his time. So we're dealing with an altogether different beast in some ways. So to really understand what Debord is talking about in this book, we actually need to get a little bit of context on this and explore the philosophy that he's building upon. And that philosophy is coming from none other than the work of Karl Marx. I do encourage you to get a holistic understanding of Marx. We do have a video on the channel that is a very basic introduction to Marx. You don't need to know anything prior. And I did get positive feedback on that video from both Marxists and people that are on the political right, like libertarians and whatnot. So I think that it's at the very least, a balanced approach, as much as I could possibly make. So I do encourage you to check that out, but if you don't feel like that, we'll cover all the context from Marx that we need for this video, because it's really only two big ideas. So Debord is building upon what Marx called commodity fetishism. Now, this is something that Marx had written about in Das Kapital. So you can think about this as, so under capitalism, the social relations between producers and consumers are expressed as relationships between commodities. So we no longer think about the people that made the thing, the stuff they did, their life, there's a real person that makes your iPhone or whatever it is, right? But we no longer think about that. And essentially, this was something that alienates us from these people. And what we're doing is we are fetishizing the commodity. Right? This becomes the most important aspect. And on the flip side of that, if someone, the business or whatever it is, they don't even really think about the customers, right? They're not people to them. It's really just a numbers game. You're not thinking about, if you run a pizza shop, you don't really think about the people who come in and eat your pizza. I mean, sure, you might be friendly and nice with them or whatever, but really, you're just trying to take their money. Let's be honest, this is what business is. And this is a core problem for Marx. Another way to think about it is as a material relation between people and a social relation between commodities. So the end result is that the commodities appear to have a life and value of their own, independent of the labor and laborer that produced them. And this, for Marx, this is a very big problem, right? Because one of the things that make life worth living is, being connected to other people. And if we are continuously engaging in the market, and what we're doing is we are reducing these other people. You got to think about the difference between going to that small mom and pop shop where you have a really good relationship with the owner, maybe they're a family friend, and going to McDonald's, where everyone at that enterprise is fundamentally a stranger. You are fetishizing the commodity, and that's all it is to you, right? It's a nothing. It's very strange. So what ends up happening is buyers and sellers don't think of themselves as interacting with other people. They think only of the commodity or the money. So what we're doing is we are fetishizing the commodity. It becomes of, sacred almost value to us. And for Marx, the problem with all of this is that it results in alienation. We feel isolated, we feel disconnected from other people. It results in a low trust society and all these other things, right? All these horrible things that goes on in the modern condition. So Debord's spectacle can be seen as something of an evolution or an expansion on Marx's idea. The spectacle thrives on the commodification process where not just goods, but experiences, ideas, and relationships become commodified, reduced to representations. And I think this is where it gets really interesting, because commodity fetishism, that was a really profound insight for the time. But this is not really the world we live in anymore, right? Most of the consumer goods that are available, most of the things that we spend our money on are not really commodities in the traditional sense, right? It really is, experiences, ideas, relationships, all these different things that we buy. We are really buying into something that we want to believe, right? And we'll talk about more examples in a little bit here, because I know this is a little abstract. But one of the problems with this is that we relate more to the representations than to our lived experiences, leading to, again, further alienation and superficiality. So life is being reduced slowly but surely to nothing but surface level appearances. And that's a real problem. There's a quote that floats around on the internet that I think sums it up pretty well. I shop, therefore I am. What other quote encapsulates the modern consumer better than this? I don't think anything does. Truly, nothing else captures the essence of the modern consumer better than this. So let's talk about some examples because I think this makes it a little bit more concrete. So I've got a whole bunch here. So you got to think about men who drive these trucks, right? These giant trucks. It's really strange when you think about it because, for one, these things are expensive. For two, they're gas guzzlers, bad for the environment. Yeah, I know no one really cares about the environment, but, it's really strange because it's like, why are you buying this giant, expensive, gas guzzling thing? And, there was a study even done. Something like 80 or 90% of people that own trucks haul something like less than once a year. So for all intents and purposes, they don't really move anything, right? Once in a blue moon, like your brother needs to move a couch, but like that's pretty much it, and that happens once every like 2 years maybe. So what's really going on here? Well, there is a certain idea that is personified in the truck, right? You are presenting yourself as masculine, as strong, as tough. Oh, I work with my hands, so I need to drive a truck because I'm, tough and manly, and, I'm hauling wood all over the place, right? Now, it doesn't matter that you don't actually use the truck for any of those things, but, that's the idea, right? I think another really good example, one that is kind of hits home for me, is the psychology of Apple users, right? So Apple, right, they have this brand, this essentially a persona that goes on with people that buy these computers, where they really want to believe that they're innovative and creative and they're going to change the world. And you look at pretty much everyone that works in tech, overwhelmingly they buy these really expensive computers, and it's very strange. But when you see it through the lens of the society of the spectacle, you kind of see what's really going on here. People are not really buying a computer. People are buying a certain ideal of themselves. Now, from personal experience, and mind you, I am making this video on an Apple computer, so, I'm not criticizing anyone else. I'm criticizing myself here. But, many years ago, I had been a Windows user all my life. And then a couple years ago, I had kind of a pivotal moment in my life, and I decided that I was going to work in tech. And then I started working at a tech startup, and I was the only guy that did not have an Apple computer. And it was strange because like I literally could not help myself. I just had to get one. And now I fit in, and it's like, yeah, I'm like one of the tech pros or whatever. So it's really weird how that works. And again, this is Spectacle 101 right here. I bought this to reinforce a certain narrative that I have about myself, that I work in tech, that I'm special or smart or whatever the heck I want to believe, right? It's really strange to think about. And when you start looking at the things you buy, you can start kind of seeing a pattern emerge. I think another really good example is anything that is Instagrammable. If you've ever purchased clothing or something that you really want other people to see, I know some people, sometimes people will buy books like, oh, I really want people to see Crime and Punishment on my bookshelf. Never mind that I'll never actually read it, but I want people to see that on my bookshelf, right? Same thing going on there. I think a really good example too is what's going on with the gaming industry. So, many years ago, I've been a gamer all my life, and it's been strange to see the shift in the industry, because what happened was, it used to be, back in the day, you got nickel and dimed to buy DLC or downloadable content. And this was normally like new guns, new maps, new missions to complete. There were a whole bunch of really interesting things there. But what we've seen now is actually this is not the most profitable thing to sell. In fact, the most profitable thing to sell in these games is actually customization options. Costumes for your character to wear, right? You think about Fortnite. God, billions of dollars children are spending to customize their character on Fortnite. It's pretty weird. Gun skins, camos, it's wild. And the wildest part about it is that these don't change anything in game other than like the way your character looks. And the fact that this is the most profitable thing to sell in modern video games, that tells you everything you need to know. Everything you need to know. And I think one other really good example is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the PC Master Race. Essentially, this is a niche community online, a subreddit, where PC gaming enthusiasts, like to circle jerk about how great PC gaming is. And what's really strange about it is, this is a huge community. And, essentially the narrative is that, we buy gaming computers, we have more options, we can, pirate games, we can get, download a whole bunch of free games, and, we've got better options compared to the plebs who game on consoles, like Xbox, PlayStation, God forbid, a Nintendo. But essentially what's going on here is like, they really want to reinforce this idea that they are superior in some way, shape, or form. And, and again, there are some elements of PC gaming that are better for, gaming. As a gamer, you really do have more customization options and wider access to games. However, if you spend enough time on this community, you'll inevitably see that there are quite a few people that are members of this community that don't even play games. They'll be like, yeah, like I don't really play anymore. I don't have the time or energy. Like I bought this $2,000 or $3,000 gaming computer and I just don't really feel like playing it. The only thing I use it for is watching YouTube videos. So it's very strange to see. I mentioned this actually in a recent video, Do We Live in a Simulation? I do encourage you to check that video out, because we do actually explore the society of the spectacle in that video as well, and many other interesting ideas. But I think those are some good examples here. I think this makes it concrete enough that we can hopefully move on. So there are a couple of problems with doing this, right? Because this is our consumer behavior. These are things that we are doing. And, essentially Debord noticed that the more we engage with the spectacle, the more we become disconnected from the real world. And this is very easy to see. Debord put it like this, quote, "The more he identifies with the dominant images of need, the less he understands his own life and his own desires." And I think this is very evident in the shockingly common phenomenon of people lacking self-awareness. Now, I don't like to point the finger at people, but just from personal experience, I know that in my past, before I, got involved with like philosophy and all this, I totally and completely defined my sense of self with the things that I buy. I think the way most people do, and we don't even realize that we are doing it. And what ends up happening is, how can you understand yourself if you are defining your sense of self, with Nike sneakers, with, a gaming PC, with an Apple computer? These are not things that can tell you who you are. Who you are is, this is a very complex thing. But what we are all trying to do is, outsource it. We're trying to, the businessmen are going to tell us who we are, and then we buy it, and then we feel good about ourselves. And like, this is the way our modern economy works for some reason. Very strange. Debord writes, quote, "The spectacle's estrangement from the acting subject is expressed by the fact that the individual's gestures are no longer his own. They are the gestures of someone else who represents them to him." I think this quote here perfectly articulates what the hell is wrong with everything, right? Why it's so difficult to become self-aware and have self-knowledge and to really understand what is going on inside your own head. It's because we've outsourced it. We are defining our sense of selves with what we buy. And this is just deeply problematic. So essentially, they have robbed us of our humanity and are selling it back to us in tiny, overpriced pieces. Because at the end of the day, no camos that you buy on Call of Duty or Fortnite skins or Nike sneakers, none of this stuff can tell you who you are. This is, who you are is up to you, right? It's up to you to discover, but also to build, to forge the kind of person you want to be. But we're not doing this. Increasingly, we are just mindless consumers. And this is one of Debord's biggest problems with the spectacle. So, in the society of the spectacle, the real world basically becomes unreachable. We are so totally disconnected from it, we don't even recognize it anymore. We don't like it. We don't want it. So, the more you engage with the spectacle's representations, the further you drift from reality. As Debord put it, quote, "The spectacle is the nightmare of imprisoned modern society, which ultimately expresses nothing more than its desire to sleep. The spectacle is the guardian of sleep." So we're all in one deep slumber. We don't even realize that we're not really in control of our destinies, of our reality, of our sense of self, of our connection with others. It's kind of horrifying. Really is horrifying. And you can see very easily how the spectacle fosters passivity, right? Instead of being autonomous and capable of acting onto the world, you're reduced to a mindless consumer, capable only of purchasing your own sense of identity. As Debord put it, quote, "It is the sun that never sets over the empire of modern passivity." It is, you see what I mean? This is some pretty deep stuff. It's very depressing. It's kind of scary when you think about it, because it is a really good opportunity to take a step back and think about yourself and like, oh my God, this is why I'm so obsessed with, buying these weird philosophical books at Books A Million. This is why I want everyone to know that I own an Apple computer. This is why I'm so desperately obsessed with, all these random customization things. It is horrifying when you see it. And man, again, once you see it, you don't really unsee it. So I'm sorry if this fundamentally ruins your life. I am very sorry about that. But for Debord, this is not even the darkest part, because to Debord, the spectacle functions as a weapon for social control to further pacify us. How does that happen? Debord writes, quote, "The spectacle's function in society is the concrete manufacture of alienation." So again, this all goes back to Marx and his original observation of how modern society is deeply alienating and leaves people horribly isolated and lonely. The spectacle leads to the degradation of individual creativity and authentic social interactions. There's a transformation from being into having, and from having into merely appearing. I loved that line right there so much, because I don't think anything truly encapsulates what the hell is wrong with the world now better than this right here. So let's talk about one more example here. So back in the day, there was a point in time when being well-traveled was obviously recognized as valuable, right? Because it meant that you experienced different parts of the world, different cultures and customs and languages, and you're more well-read, and you're better able to zoom out of your own biases. You can look at the world and culture and all these things a little bit more holistically. That was slowly but surely reduced into tourism, where we go and we buy a bunch of knickknacks, right? I went to the Bahamas and all I got was this lousy t-shirt, right? I don't get me wrong, I love the meme. In fact, I think I own a shirt or two like that myself. But, this is not really the same as being a well-traveled person. We have bastardized traveling into tourism, right? And it's taken something away from the experience. But what's increasingly happening now is we don't even do it for the knickknacks. We're doing it for social media. We travel, we go to the beach, or we go somewhere fancy, and you're not really there if you don't take a picture of yourself there and post it to your Instagram or Facebook or whatever the heck you use these days. And you can see it pretty clearly, right? How many people can you say are truly well-traveled in a meaningful sense of the word, right? Compared to the people that, you go somewhere and you take a picture of yourself at that location. It's pretty scary. It's pretty sad. It's very sad. So it's not actually about being happy or well-traveled or anything else, but looking like the kind of person that is happy and well-traveled, right? You want other people to see you at Salem, Massachusetts, or, the Grand Canyon, or wherever the heck you went. Even if you were not really present when you were there, even if you were not really paying attention, even if you were not really into it, even if you were zoning out in a bad mood, didn't even want to be there. This becomes even more true of people that, are influencers or celebrities or whatever, right? I'm sure they don't even care about any of the crap that they're actually doing, but, you got to feed the spectacle. This is what you got to do. You got to look like someone that is well-traveled and fancy and so on and so forth. And again, this leads to more alienation, more isolation, and more loneliness. Debord writes, quote, "The reigning economic system is a vicious circle of isolation. Its technologies are based on isolation, and they contribute to that same isolation." So this is where we need to talk about America's new pandemic. No, we're not talking about COVID, my friend. We're talking about loneliness. Pretty much anywhere you read online will tell you that half of Americans report being lonely and isolated. We don't really have connections with people anymore. We are isolated, rootless individuals. We don't really stand for anything. We buy our sense of self. I mean, this is a horrifying reality. And I mean, God, half of Americans, that's a lot of people. That's like hundreds of millions of people right there. Oh my God, right? Like, oh man. And to Debord, this is intentional, right? This is exactly what the spectacle wants. This is the goal. This is what it wants to happen because, it's good for business, right? People that are isolated, alienated individuals, they're very good for the economy. Very good for the economy. So this is a really important point to make. So Debord is critical of capitalism, arguing that despite providing for our basic necessities, right, food, clothing, and housing, capitalism relies on an ever-shifting set of desires. Quote, "The real consumer becomes a consumer of illusions. The commodity is this factually real illusion, and the spectacle is its general manifestation." So if you think just from your own personal experience, what you spend money on and, what you spend your time trying to get, it's not really, the basics, right? For the most part, we are all fed and we have clothes and we have houses and we're not homeless, right? At least not all of us. But increasingly, we spend our time and money trying to get more spectacle, more ever-shifting nonsense, more stuff we don't really need, stuff that we buy and we throw out in a couple of weeks because we realize that, oh yeah, this pair of shorts doesn't really confirm my identity the way I thought it would. So this ever-shifting desire for more illusion is shaped by media, marketing, and advertising. So to Debord, the media is the most important aspect to maintaining the spectacle, to keeping the illusion going, and to making sure that we're buying into it and thinking about it, and we're not interacting with reality itself, our lived experiences, our relationships, our actions, our identity. We're just infatuated by the media. Debord writes, quote, "When culture becomes nothing more than a commodity, it must also become the star commodity of the spectacular society." Essentially, it keeps us feeding into the illusion. It separates us from reality completely. If you think about that old saying, if a tree falls in the middle of the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it really make a noise? to Debord, we could say that no, it doesn't make a noise. It doesn't even really exist. If it's not presented on the screen, if it's not on your social media feed, if it's not on television, if it's not on YouTube, it doesn't really exist. And that is a real problem because, again, we're just disconnected from our lived experiences. What is on the screen, what the things that we think about, that we consume from the media, they are everything. They are almost the entirety of our consciousness. So the media perpetuates this spectacle, creating something of a pseudo world where representations are more significant than reality. Now, this idea right here was so influential that it inspired an entire new field of thought. If you're familiar with Jean Baudrillard or his idea of hyperreality, I mean, that is just a wild rabbit hole to go down. I think the next logical thing after this. So we will be covering that in the future. So make sure to subscribe to the channel or follow the show if you're not. But we're not going to talk too much about that here because it is a little tangential. But what we will talk about is how public life is increasingly revolving around pseudo events. Right now, this was a phrase coined by historian Daniel J. Boorstin, but I think it really fits well into Debord's analysis of the society of the spectacle. So a pseudo event is an event or activity produced for the primary purpose of being reported. It's an event that is staged essentially for the purpose of being reproduced through media and consumed by the public. So we think about a few examples, press conferences, product launches, book signings, sales events. These are all things that, what's the real purpose to doing them, right? To garnering publicity, right? Come and look at this and buy this. And this is a real problem because as more and more of the media that we consume revolve around, spectacle, right? Buying things and product launches and, book signing and whatever else. The reality, this is not reality, right? This is businessmen trying to make money from us. So not only is the spectacle replacing our lived experience, it is bombarding it with ads and marketing and nonsense that's not real life. It is purely designed to feed us more illusions, more stuff that we need to buy. And it's very sad. You think about modern social media, you can't even research a product without someone trying to give you an affiliate link, right? I'm sure you've had this experience because I know I have all the time. You go online and you try to see, this product versus that product, which one is actually better? And you'll get someone who's, oh yeah, this product is wonderful, it's amazing. Check out the affiliate link, So it's like, you watched a 14-minute YouTube video reviewing the product, and of course they're hyping it up because they want to make that affiliate commission, right? So, and those are, man, it's increasingly difficult to tell the difference between what's an ad, what's a product placement, and what's real. What actually matters? And what eventually happens is that instead of reality shaping our media shapes our reality. Now, I think there's a really good quote here from Ryan Holiday, which love Ryan Holiday, does wonderful stuff, all kinds of great books, and I do recommend his podcast on Stoicism. But a few years ago, he had written a book called Trust Me, I'm Lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator, and it's had a lasting impact on, kind of how I think about media and marketing and the spectacle. And Holiday puts it really poignantly when he writes, quote, "In an age of images and entertainment, in an age of instant emotional gratification, we neither seek nor want honesty or reality. Reality is complicated. Reality is boring. We are incapable or unwilling to handle its confusion." And I think this fits so well with Debord's idea of the spectacle. We are essentially conditioned to wanting the nonsense, to wanting the simulation, to wanting the spectacle, the illusion, the fiction. We don't even want reality anymore. And that's the real problem here. Imagine tuning out of the media, right? Not watching news or television or shows anymore, not being on social media, not being on the internet in any capacity, right? What happens to you, right? I know a few people like that, and it's almost like they're a different breed of people, right? Their brains are, it's almost as if like they're wired different. And it's because, the spectacle doesn't have as strong a stranglehold on them. And we just live in all of this illusion. And what's increasingly the problem now is that reality isn't, it's not just that it's being molded into the spectacle, which has been going on, for a very long time. But what's going on now is that reality is being molded to fit into the social media feed, which is very specific, right? Because these feeds are designed to keep us addicted, to keep us scrolling. We can't stop ourselves, right? Raise your hand if you've ever had that experience where you sit down, you look at your phone and check the time, and the next thing you know, you black out for like an hour and a half. You're looking at Reddit memes for God knows how long, and you just can't stop yourself. This is a real common experience. I know I've had this one multiple times, and it's just not reality. What you see on the screen is not real. Because what is real would actually be pretty boring. And we don't like boring anymore. So one of the examples I really like to give is actually how the music industry has changed. So if you're a musician and you want to get discovered, what you do now is increasingly, it's not even about making good music. I mean, that should be obvious. But what you want to do is actually optimize for TikTok, because you want a whole bunch of people hearing, playing your song in the background as they're making videos of themselves dancing or eating a sandwich or whatever the hell people watch on TikTok. I don't even know. I don't use TikTok. It's too much for me. But this is, if you want your music to get discovered, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to optimize for. So you can see very clearly there is a coercion of your creative genius going on with social media these days. And it's not just musicians on TikTok, it's everything, right? It is all the shows that you see on Netflix. It's every blog you've ever read, every video that you've ever seen on YouTube, every meme. All these things are optimized to work within these social media feeds, the spectacle. But this is not reality. This is not even an authentic expression of human creativity. It is coerced and co-opted, and it's very strange and dark and weird, and I don't like it, man. I like the days of authentic creative expression. Now this is where we need to talk about Debord, who, I don't think he had even realized how big an impact the society of the spectacle was going to be, but it has had a huge lasting impact and, again, inspired entire new fields of thought. I don't think we can understate just how influential this approach to thinking has been. And Debord had actually followed it up with the brilliantly named Comments on the Society of the Spectacle. So, he wrote an entire book for, to provide his own comment section on his own original book, which I love that. Now, one of the key ideas that he had talked about and really expanded upon in the comments was how the spectacle's dominance over the media is best exemplified by the modern celebrity. Debord writes, quote, "The agent of the spectacle placed on stage as a star is the opposite of the individual, the enemy of the individual in himself as well as in others." So essentially, the celebrity is the core problem of what's wrong with our society now, right? They are the most obvious sign of this spectacle, of this illusion, right? I think we all know that Hollywood and celebrities at large, especially influencers, these people are presenting a false version of reality. We know that, right? You look at the makeup, the special effects, the editing, how every supermodel is photoshopped, and then you even look at like the plastic surgery, God, look at the Kardashians. This is all illusion. This is not real life. This is an abomination. This is the spectacle. This is the society of the spectacle, my friend. And one of the problems with the celebrity is that they market a lifestyle of leisure that is wholly unattainable for the viewers, right? Because our own lifestyles being mere fragmented, productive specializations. And again, this goes back to Debord's critique of capitalism. So essentially, we have all been reduced to, little hyper specialized insects, right? Little worker bees making the system function. And then we all turn our attention and our gaze to the spectacle, and we pay attention to people that are celebrities that are living lifestyles that we all want, right? I think everyone on some level wants to live like, the Kardashians or Bill Gates or, whoever the heck it is for you, right? I don't even know. I'm not that into celebrity culture, but they market a lifestyle that everyone desperately wants. This is why so many people, desperately try to make it big in, Hollywood as an actor or an actress or what have you. And at the end of the day, it's unattainable, right? It's never going to happen for everyone, right? There's a very small select group of people who are going to be able to live this lie, this illusion, this spectacle, and then they're going to sell it to us. And we're going to watch it, and that's kind of how our society functions right now. Now, one of the problems with celebrities is that not only do they constantly peddle commodities, right? Because God, who sells more stuff than the celebrities? Constantly on ads. Oh, buy this. Do this. But they are themselves reduced to commodities. There is no authentic expression for them to participate in, right? How can you be authentic, right? I mean, I'm sure a lot of them secretly have thoughts that they know that they cannot share publicly. You cannot be truly unfiltered in any meaningful sense because, well, it would break the illusion. You wouldn't be, an ideal of yourself as such. And my friend, let's just be honest here. You don't have to look very far into celebrity culture to see that something is horribly wrong. I mean, how many celebrities and actors and whatnot are drug addicts and have all kinds of problems at home, that have horrible addictions, right? I know that there are, there's a lot of people in America that love to hate on celebrities, right? Screw you, but I think that we really should have sympathy for these people because, it's a very strange thing to go through, and reducing yourself to a one-dimensional image of stardom. This is not natural. And I think that very clearly explains why so many of them suffer from deep mental illness. And, you just look at someone like Michael Jackson, right? Someone that was born into superstardom from the time he was a kid. And, it eventually took him, right? And that's because I don't think the human brain was meant to have a million people look at them at all times. This is just not the way that we were designed to operate. And it creates a dysfunction for not just everyone watching, but also the people that are being watched. It's very sad, and yeah, I think we should stop it. And increasingly, today, it's not just that we're alienated and isolated as individuals, right? We lack authentic, meaningful, genuine relationships with other people. And instead, we develop parasocial relationships with celebrities and influencers. And if you've ever talked to someone that's really into that celebrity culture, I mean, they know everything about, like Justin Bieber or I don't know, Taylor Swift, right? These people are deeply connected to the not just the work of these people, but the people themselves. And again, it's very strange. This is something that has not happened in human history, and it is all part of the spectacle. So I don't know. I don't really have like a nice bow to tie on this other than to say that this is our horrifying reality, and I don't know what to do about it, but except say, what the hell? So in comments, Debord argued that modern society legitimizes itself through misinformation and propaganda, which I think should be pretty obvious. This is something that's always kind of been part of like the government, right? Misinformation and propaganda. I don't think that, we're making a really new point here. But he drew specific attention to the use of terrorism, right? Now you think back to modern American identity. What has shaped us more than 9/11? And Debord noticed a couple of really horrifying things about terrorism and how we are obsessed with it. I actually think that, Debord was dead before 9/11 even happened. So he wasn't even particularly talking about that specific instance, but it really goes to show how his analysis really hits home and is still relevant to this day. But essentially, he had noticed that terrorism breeds passivity toward our own government, right? So if you look at 9/11, it was a horrible tragedy, right? I don't want to minimize that in any sense. It was about 3,000 people that died in that. Lots of people had family members, and a terrible catastrophe. And I think we should acknowledge that this was a horrible thing to go through for many people. But if you look at it this is 3,000 people, right? Which is a lot, but we lose a lot more people to other things, right? So just for the sake of argument, let's look at, deaths of despair. Now, if you're not familiar with this term, this is something the media has been talking about a little bit more in the, lately. And essentially it encapsulates 3 different ways people die. So there's suicide, drug overdose, and alcoholism. So in 2018 alone, these 3 things, these deaths of despair, took 158,000 lives. So 3,000 people die in 9/11, and it is constantly on our mind. We think about it at the very least once a year. And then you compare that to something like deaths of despair, which kills 158,000 people in 2018. Not only is it more people, but this is a regular thing. If it had been 158,000 people one time in 2018, it's well, that's still horrible. It's a shocking number of people. But, it would be a one-time thing. It's not. This is something that happens every single year, and that number is going up and up and up every single year, especially since COVID, right? So if we are to believe the researchers, since COVID, this number is suspected to have increased by between 10 and 60%. So at the high end, if 158,000 has gone up by 60%, we're looking at 252,000 deaths per year by deaths of despair. My friend, that is 700 people a day. About 700 people a day die from deaths of despair since COVID. This is shocking. This is, God, I don't know how you categorize this as anything other than a genocide. And no one talks about it. No one talks about it. It just gets so little media attention. Once in a blue moon you'll see an article, but it's not enough, right? And then you compare it to all the publicity and the ink that we see for 9/11, which is 3,000 people one time 20 years ago. So if the estimates on deaths of despair are accurate, it suggests that there's a 9/11 happening every 5 days. So every 5 days, there's a new 9/11, but with deaths of despair instead. It's not terrorism. It's not some bearded men from the Middle East coming to kill you. It is people killing themselves right here. So another way to put it, 28 people die from deaths of despair every hour. So if you watch this entire video, 28 people about have died from suicide, drug overdose, or alcoholism. And we don't talk about it. We don't mention it. It fades into the background. And I think this really hits home a lot of what Debord is talking about. So it's pretty much an open secret that America loves conspiracy theories. And we can talk a lot about that. I'm sure there are many sociological factors and circumstances that come into this, but there are some times where these conspiracy theories turn out to be true, right? Not all of them. In fact, I think a good chunk of them are bogus. But one that has really lasted pretty much across the political spectrum is everyone is pretty skeptical of the details of 9/11. And, not in the sense that, maybe it wasn't orchestrated directly, right? There are some people that say Bush did 9/11. That's a little far for me. But if you look at the people who got rich from 9/11, There's something interesting going on there. Now, we're not going to talk about the details of that, but, suffice to say, the American public is pretty skeptical of this, right? But, if you really look at what 9/11 did, was instead of terrorism being something far away in a country you couldn't find on a map, it was transformed. Terrorism is now something that could happen to you. And that's the spectacle, right? Because, if you look at the statistics, if you think about the numbers, the odds of you being the victim of like some Muslim terrorist from across the world, I mean, this is just not going to happen, my friend. If you die, you're more likely to die when you get in your car and drive to the supermarket than, being suicide bombed by, some radical extremist from the Middle East. This is reality. I'm sorry. But it really hits on Debord's criticism of how the government uses terrorism to really foster this passivity, right? And if you look at 9/11, what were the end results of it, right? So American hegemony was reinforced. New wars were justified because we can't get enough of those foreign wars. They passed the Patriot Act, right, which essentially stripped American citizens of our privacy and freedom. And then let's also acknowledge that the Patriot Act is still on the books. It's not going away anytime soon. So, terrorism happened that one time. Again, terrible that 3,000 Americans had to perish. But why don't we do anything of a similar magnitude to the deaths of despair? Well, the deaths of despair doesn't have like a clear, obvious killer, right? When you can show someone a picture of a man with a beard and with one of those silly hats, and how he's going to come and kill your family, well, that really rouses people up. That makes them scared. And well, all right, yeah, we're going to give up some of our privacy and freedom so we can be safe, but is the price you got to pay. Otherwise, Osama bin Laden's going to come and kill you. And then you compare it to the deaths of despair, right? What do you even point to? What do you get mad at, right? There are just thousands of invisible socio-cultural, political, economic factors that, how do you get mad at anything like that, right? So it's insane. Truly, it is insane, my friend. Debord writes, quote, "Such a perfect democracy constructs its own inconceivable foe, terrorism. Its wish is to be judged by its enemies rather than by its results." So by shifting our attention to terrorists, the state legitimizes itself by comparison. Because what it does is, you think of our, oh, yeah, like we live in kind of a horrible dystopia in many ways. But, don't focus on that. You gotta think about the terrorists who are trying to come and kill you and take away your freedom, right? And, when you peel back a few layers here and really think about this, if we judged our society by its results, we would be looking at something like the deaths of despair, where, 250,000 Americans are killing themselves every year. We would be outraged, right? We would demand change. We would want something to be done about our brothers and sisters and kids and parents killing themselves. And we would be less concerned about, terrorism in some country that we couldn't even find on a map. But this is what's going on with terrorism. This is why we hear so much about it. This is why there's a global war on terror and not a global war on deaths of despair. Because you can see a terrorist. The terrorist is part of the spectacle. And the end result is that we're legitimizing our own dystopia. I think it's barbaric that 250,000 Americans will kill themselves this year. And we're not talking about it. We're talking about all this other nonsense. It's messed up. It's very messed up. Debord writes, quote, "The spectating populations must certainly never know everything about terrorism, but they must always know enough to convince them that, compared with terrorism, everything else seems rather acceptable, or in any case, more rational and democratic." And this is what's really going on here, right? Because for one, if you actually look at why people become terrorists in the first place, oftentimes they actually have some pretty legitimate grievances. Like, oh yeah, you Americans came into our country and ruined everything, and my children died from an American soldier, and all these horrible things, and bombs were dropped on my village. Right? People don't become terrorists for no reason. So that's again about keeping us ignorant, but I think it really does a very effective job at justifying our government's own horrible dystopian nonsense, right? It really does just make it acceptable, right? We're doing this to protect ourselves, and we accepted something like the Patriot Act. When you actually look at what goes on, I mean, they can read every text message, everything that goes on the internet. All of it is forfeited over to the state. And it's wild, man. It's wild. No one even really talks about it anymore. So the end result is that, it encourages passive acceptance of our society's own failures. So, my friend, if you've made it this far, you're deep enough into this rabbit hole to see that we live in a very distorted version of reality. We are alienated from each other, from ourselves, from authentic expressions, from our lived experiences. Everything is spectacle. Our own behavior constantly reinforces and perpetuates the ideas that we have of ourselves. We pay attention to things like, terrorism coming to kill us while we passively accept the dystopia that is our modern reality. It's messed up. It's pretty depressing. It's kind of horrifying, if I'm going to be honest with you. It does keep me up at night. But there is hope. Debord argued that there are practical ways that you can essentially fight this, right? We can fight back and take our reality back. And what essentially Debord called this détournement, right? I apologize. This is a French word. I can't speak French, my dude. But détournement means, deflection, diversion, rerouting, distortion, misuse, misappropriation, hijacking, or otherwise turning something aside from its normal course or purpose. Right? Essentially, Debord was arguing that we need to take these cultural symbols, the spectacle that has been forced upon us by merit of existing in this society, and we need to fight back and kind of hijack the meaning. Right? We need to change it. We need to divert it. We need to subvert the horrible dystopia that is our media and reality and our spectacle. Debord writes, quote, "Détournement not only leads to the discovery of new aspects of talent, in addition, clashing head-on with all social and legal conventions, it cannot fail to be a powerful cultural weapon in the service of real class struggle." So essentially, this is our way of fighting back and kind of forging a reality, kind of coming out of the matrix, right? If you really think about it, trying to reclaim our consciousness. In some of the examples, you got to think about memes, right? I think memes are wonderful. I love memes. I think you should love memes too. But you can think about, the way that some of, a lot of the internet memes, especially like, they've truly bastardized certain ideas, right? You got to think about how Spider-Man became Spoder-Man, right? If you're old enough to remember that one, that was hilarious. Spoder-Man is wonderful. But, there are also examples in mainstream culture even. You got to think about how the early seasons of The Simpsons, were a very direct parody of American life. About how, there's a lot of room that we can, kind of take the spectacle that's been presented to us and subvert it and to criticize it and to hopefully reclaim some meaning in our lives and kind of have some connection with reality, right? Even if it's flawed, this is essentially the only way, because the alternative is just accepting it, right? Becoming the passive consumer that they want you to be, to outsourcing your creation of your identity and your sense of self to businessmen who are trying to sell you Fortnite skins. But my friend, that is going to be it for the video. I really hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for listening all the way through. And make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow the show, right, wherever you listen to this, because we will be talking about a few really interesting things in the future, right? I already mentioned, we're going to be covering hyperreality and Jean Baudrillard, and because that is a direct extension of Debord's train of thought here. And that gets crazy, man. That's truly shocking and horrifying. I'm currently reading Jean Baudrillard's Simulacra and Simulation, and it is a wild read. It's about as scary as Society of a Spectacle. But we're also going to be talking about Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber too. I've been researching that for months now because there is a lot to that. That's going to be a giant presentation video. But I hope you are excited for all of that. I'm happy to be making videos again, and I hope that you are happy as well about it. If not, I might cry tonight. So don't do that to me, bro. Don't do that, man. But anyway, thanks so much. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.